Israel has launched a second major raid on the Al-Shifa hospital in northern Gaza, claiming senior Hamas militants are using the hospital to hide. Israeli forces say the operation is based on intelligence that senior Hamas members have regrouped inside the facility, a claim Hamas and hospital staff deny. The Israeli military has released video of what it says is its troops being fired at from within the hospital grounds, as well as footage of bullets and other weaponry. This vision could not be independently verified. People taking shelter in the hospital have been fleeing the area. Israeli forces say they've killed 20 Palestinian gunmen and detained others.
Now confirm that Faik Mabuchach, head of the Operations Directorate of Hamas's internal security, was killed. He coordinated Hamas terrorist activities in the Gaza Strip.
Al Jazeera says that two of its journalists were amongst those captured. One, Ismail Al-Ghoul, has reportedly been released 12 hours after being detained. The whereabouts of his colleague is not yet known. Well, with more on the detention of journalists in Gaza, here's Jodie Ginsberg, the head of the Committee to Protect Journalists.
We're obviously relieved that he's been released. He suffered 12 hours in detention. He was, we understand, ordered to strip. He had his equipment destroyed. That includes mobile phones, laptops. We understand that the press vehicle was also had damage to it. The press tent that the journalists used for being outside of the hospital, where they've done a lot of reporting. There's been obviously a lot of reporting outside Al-Shifa for some time. All of that was destroyed, and that's extremely concerning. These are journalists trying to report on one of the most significant geopolitical events in the world, and it's really important that they be able to do their jobs.
And how many other media workers are thought to have been arrested at the same time as the Al Jazeera correspondent, and is it known what's happened to them?
It's not clear how many were arrested at the same time as the Al Jazeera correspondent, and we don't know yet what's happened to them. Of course, if you have your phone destroyed, it's very difficult to communicate with anyone, and that's on top of communications blackouts that we've seen in Gaza as well and in the area. We know that about 25 journalists are currently in detention. Most of those are in what's called administrative detention, which means you don't know what the charges are that are brought against those individuals, and they're there, they could be there indefinitely.
What have you heard from the IDF on this?
We asked for comment from the IDF, and we have yet to receive any.
So there are challenges in reporting on wars, of course, but what are the additional pressures and dangers of reporting on this particular conflict?
There are always challenges reporting on war. In this particular conflict, there are a number. One is that there is nowhere in Gaza effectively that's safe. Often in traditional wars, there might be a line behind which people know they're safe, or places that they can go to, hospitals, refugee camps, where they know that it's unlikely that those places will be attacked. That's not the case in this war. You have the additional challenges of the fact that all of the reporters who are reporting the war are suffering the war. They're subject to the same lack of food, lack of fuel, constant bombardment. And it's really important to remember that in this particular conflict, the only people who are able to report out of Gaza are Palestinian journalists. Israel has not allowed any international journalists into Gaza except on very tightly controlled Israeli army missions, visits that are entirely controlled by Israel. So the only people bringing us the news of what's happening inside Gaza are Palestinian journalists.
So how are those Palestinian journalists managing to both live and work there?
It's incredibly difficult. Fewer and fewer are able to do so. There's perhaps a few dozen still able to operate in Gaza City itself. The food shortages in the north of Gaza are extreme. People are running out of equipment with which they can broadcast and get that out. It's extraordinarily challenging. Just surviving is extraordinarily challenging, and getting the information out, making sure that you're able to charge your phones to transmit is even harder.
And how many journalists and media workers have been killed so far in this conflict, Jodie?
So far, 95 journalists, we have documented 95 journalists having been killed in this war, 90 of them Palestinians. That is an unprecedented number. More journalists died in the first 10 weeks of the war than have ever been killed in a single country over an entire year. So that gives you a sense of the scale, but also of the danger facing journalists trying to report.